On the 10th of April 1994, convicted murderer Janusz Waluś assassinated Mr. Hani, who was the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, the Chief of Staff of the People's Army Umkhonto weSizwe, a member of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, a husband and a father. At the time of Mr. Hani's assassination, the negotiations for a free and equal South Africa had stalled, and his tragic death forced the negotiating parties to set a date for the first democratic general elections on the 27th April 1994. So every year that we celebrate Freedom Day as a country, we are in large part indebted to the death of Hani. Mr. Waluś was sentenced to death on the 15th of October 1993 for the assassination, and on 7th November 2000, his sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. Mr. Waluś held dual citizenship, that of Poland and South Africa, from 1986 to 2017, when his South African citizenship was revoked, and now he holds only Polish citizenship. Several ministers of Correctional Services denied Waluś's application for parole since 2011. On 21 November 2022, the Constitutional Court ordered that Janusz Waluś be placed on parole within 10 days of the date of the order, in line with the applicable legislation. At the time, the applicable legislation prescribed a parole period of 2 years. Then Janusz Waluś was subsequently placed on parole on the 7th of December 2022, and subject to parole conditions. Today, the 6th of December 2024, the parole period of Janusz Waluś has come to an end, in line with the Constitutional Court decision. Since Janusz Waluś no longer holds any South African enabling documents, the Department of Home Affairs will be deporting him. This morning, the National Commissioner of Correctional Services will formally hand over Janusz Waluś to the Department of Home Affairs for deportation. The handover and deportation process is being overseen by the National Joint Operational and Intelligence Structures, commonly known as the NOIJOINS, following a cabinet briefing earlier this week. In preparation for this deportation, Cabinet assigned Deputy President Mr. Paul Mashatile, the Minister in the Presidency Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, Minister of Justice Ms. Mamuluko Kupai, and Minister of Home Affairs Dr. Leon Schreiber to visit the family of the late Hani to inform them of these developments. During this engagement, the government delegation received a request for an inquest from Mr. Hani's wife or widow and the South African Communist Party. The request will be referred to the Department of Justice and Correctional Services to process it.
The question around costs, it was one of the very first things that I queried as well, and I'm happy to report that South African taxpayers, including Mr. Hani's widow, will not be paying for the deportation of this individual. The Polish embassy has indicated that they will do so, and I think that reflects once again the urgency and sensitivity with which Home Affairs is handling this matter, to make sure that we make the best of a very difficult situation, at least in terms of the administrative and other processing matters that are required of us.
In relation to the request for an inquest, it has been made by both Mrs. Hani Osdimpo and together with SACP. And what the process will be is that we will definitely engage with them, because this was made when we met with them. So we'll take the process, look at the legal framework, and because they believe that there's evidence that could have led to a different conclusion. There are things that they believe were not looked into that they shared with us in the meeting. So we will definitely have to take that up with the various bodies that are responsible for this work, and we will interact with the family together with the SACP in this regard.
The pain of losing a loved one, more especially in a manner that it was so horrendous, so planned, meticulously, and also the rash manner in which the case was conducted, it's appalling at most. Mr. Waluś was arrested. Hardly 2 months later, he was convicted in 1993 by the apartheid government. And why the request for an inquest is because there are many questions for the family and also for South Africans in general that remain unanswered. So as government, we appreciate the pain of Hani and her children, and also South Africans at large, and the Communist Party, and the mass democratic movement at large. And it's for that reason that as cabinet we decided, the president decided he's sending a delegation so that they do not read it in newspapers, they don't see it anyway. And it was not just a small delegation, it was a powerful delegation. But secondly, as we've indicated in the statement, since 2011, our ministers of justice and correctional services fought against the parole. But there is no appeal beyond the Constitutional Court. When a Constitutional Court has ordered, has taken a decision, made an order, that decision is final. So this is not a decision of the government. This is a decision of the Constitutional Court. And we are merely abiding by that decision. Because when we don't abide, you are going to say the government is truant. And it's also from that Concord decision that we learned. Because when the Concord prescribed even the parole period in terms of applicable legislation, which then became 2 years, a paltry 2 years. It's a sore point for us. But as government, we went back and said we need to change this. Lifers, their parole is for life. And that's because you learn as you go and you correct as you go. And that's the corrections we've made. Because we understand that pain. Because for us, the life of South Africans matter, irrespective of their stature. But a hero of our struggle, a contributor to the democracy that we today enjoy, and we forget that people lost their lives, his life will never be forgotten. So we share the pain of Ms. Hani, but we're going to continue to endeavor to make sure as we redress, and we accept that the redress period has not been enough. That's why we have been opening inquests of Ntate Griffith Mqenke, the Noctula Smelane, a number of inquests are continuing to be held so that we find closure and understand, but also so that we don't repeat the mistakes. If you recall on the cabinet statement of yesterday, we indicated that as we celebrate the Reconciliation Day, we are going to have an overview of what does the Truth and Reconciliation Commission work done. Because there's a sense in the country that we've forgiven our oppressors, but with no benefit to the oppressed. And we'll have to engage as a nation to say what must become the benefit of the oppressed. That's why the government of national unity has prioritized that we must have inclusive growth that creates jobs so that our people do not continue to languish in poverty. This freedom is not about politics. This freedom must be about bread and butter and the ability to live comfortably in this land called South Africa.